Hey y'all, I'm Elisa, the Scrappy Wife behind ScrappyWife.com, and today I have a Bible journal process video for you. I am working through the devotional This I Know from By the Well for God, and we'll be working on day 4, which is called Look for His Glory. I am going to journal in Luke 19, specifically looking at Luke 19:40, where Jesus says, I tell you, if they keep quiet, the stones will cry out. So that is the verse I am focusing on today. I have a lot of supplies pulled, some stamps, some Neocolor too. We'll see how this goes. I kind of have an idea in my head, but sometimes that gets transformed as we work. So I will make sure to link everything that I use down below. Heads up, some of those will be affiliate links. They don't cost you anymore, but they do go a long way to supporting this channel. So I always appreciate when you're able to shop those. All right, let's go. There were a couple elements that I knew for sure I wanted to use, and the first would be these stone die cuts that come with the kit, and you can see I'm just experimenting with where I want them placed, and they go really well with the verse that I am journaling in Luke 19, starting in 38, where it says, Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest. Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to Jesus, Teacher, rebuke your disciples. I tell you, he replied, if they keep quiet, the stones will cry out. So the stone imagery is something I'm going to go with to help remind me that every part of God's creation really sings of his glory, and his glory just can be found all over our lives, not just in the beauty of nature, but in the beauty of the details, the things that happen in our daily life. God's glory is just present all of the time. I am so excited to use this large background stamp. This is the blueprint texture stamp, and it is gorgeous. I'm just stamping it off on an extra sheet of paper just to make sure it's the first time I've used it. So I just wanted to give it a first try on an extra sheet. And you'll see that several times through the video, in that I always like to stamp first on a side sheet of paper. I don't really consider myself a great stamper, and so for me, it's good practice. Also, for this particular stamp, I wanted a second generation stamp because I wanted it to be inked up nicely, but I didn't necessarily want a really bold image. So you'll see, once again, I'm going to stamp it off on an extra sheet of paper just to take off some of the ink, and then I'm scooting it up and again continuing with the background and stamping this on top. And this is just to add some interest to the background. You get that sketchy blueprint look, and it brings in the purple, which I am loving. Here, I'm just using my brush and tapping off clean water. Because I use Distress Oxide ink, it will react to the water and just add some very cool water spots, some fun texture. And then I'm taking this brush and blending it on the edge just to soften the edges so that the stamp doesn't stop abruptly, but kind of disappears, kind of fades out, which I think is a neat way to use this background stamp. Sometimes it can be hard because and a block like this, it feels blocky. And so softening the edges with water is a great way to go if you just want it to fade into the background. Okay, still working on the background here. These are Neocolor 2 crayons, which if you haven't seen these before, they are a water reactive crayon. So I'm bringing in a little bit of water. I just colored off some onto one of my stamping blocks and then added some water, and it turns into something that's kind of like watercolor, and I'm tapping it off for some splatter effects around the page. I really loved how the splattering looked with just the water, and so now I'm going to add color. I am drawing in between each layer. I'll do 3 different colors, a deep purple, this kind of beautiful teal color, and then a gray. And I always dry between each layer because I don't want them to blend. I want them to layer on top of each other. And if I left it wet in between and some of the drops from the different colors went together, it would end up being sort of muddy looking, but drying in between helps me to avoid that. So here's the last color. It's the gray. Again, just adding a little bit of water and then tapping it with this big soft brush. And I'm making sure to kind of carry it over the edge, again, softening the edge so it's not this strict harsh line at the end of the margin, but that it kind of comes into the text of the Bible. Next, I'm going to use my Neocolor 2 crayons to use as a stamping technique. So I'm going to actually choose this stone stamp from one of the By the Well for God stamp sets. And I just get the Neocolor 2 wet a little bit at the end, just dip it into water, and then I'm coloring it directly on to my stamp. And this is going to give a very much of a watercolor look, very loose, which is what I'm going for. And it allows me to blend the colors in. So I'm able to add a little bit of purple, a little bit of that turquoise teal in there just for hints. And again, I will stamp it on an extra sheet just to give it a try first. It was a little bit of an uneven surface, so now I will just add back in some gray on the parts that got stamped off, and then the purple, the colors again. And I really like the look of stamping like this with the Neocolors. It's a fun look. It's hard to control. So if you are not a big fan of not having total control of what your stamped image is going to look like, this might not be for you. For me, I think it's a fun way to add some interest to your page. So here I go, stamping directly onto my page, and it's pretty cool what it looks like in the end. And then because I'm avoiding that blocky look, you'll see I'm just kind of stamping to the side and having it trail off on the edge, drying it completely before I start adding more elements. This heart is actually made from faux suede, and it's a Cricut material. I cut it out with my Cricut maker, and it's very paper thin, so it's not going to add a bunch of bulk to my Bible, but oh, the texture is beautiful. I love the idea of having suede and leather in your Bible without adding tons of bulk. I do a few adhesive spots with my tape runner just so I know it'll stick in place, and then I'm using a product called Fabri-Tac, which is a great adhesive to have in your craft room, and it's fabulous for pieces like this, a different material, tacking it on to paper, really secure, does a fantastic job. So just adding that on, and I love this warm color of this warm suede with the combination of all of the cool colors that are that I use during the rest of this page. So I have the cool blues and the cool purples and the gray, and I'm going to use these rocks and kind of nestle them around this heart. But then the heart is very warm, and I think that is such a great metaphor for how you can find warmth, you can find God's glory, which to me kind of, I picture it as a warm feeling, as just kind of sensing his presence when you can see his glory in nature or his glory playing out in your life. And so I like that juxtaposition of the coolness of some of those rocks and stones, and then the warmth of the heart in that faux suede. I'll trim off that little extra bit and then work on my title for this page. So this is the Cornerstone Alpha, which is a very large alpha, and it is absolutely beautiful because it does look like stone. So you're going to see I'm going to place it on my stamp block, and then I am going to opt for some washi tape, and I'm going to mark off my page with some washi tape to work as a mask, because I want to kind of layer my title and my subtitle. So the title is This I Know, it goes along with the devotional, and then the subtitle is going to be about God's glory, but I didn't want it to be right underneath. I kind of wanted to layer the two pieces. And so this is one of my favorite techniques to do that with. So I just picked a random washi, laying it down on my page, and I'm going to have two lines because this will be on one line and then I know will be on the other. And then I'm going to stamp directly on top of where I put the washi down, and you end up with a pretty cool effect. I actually opt for my VersaFine Onyx black ink because I want a pretty crisp looking stamp. So I will ink up the word this nice and strong and then stamp it directly over the washi just like this. I will clean up those letters and then switch over to the words I know and stamp those down as well. All right, so I switched out the letters. Now I'm inking up the phrase I know to go on the second line. And again, same thing, directly over that washi tape. It doesn't matter the color of the washi. I just used a spare washi in my room and chose the thickness that I thought would be appropriate. It ends up being a little bit thick, but that's okay. Now I've brought back in a Neocolor, that purple, and I'm just going to very lightly fill in these alphas. So the alpha is meant to be like stone, so it has some cracking and some space in it, and I wanted to soften it up a little bit up there, so I added the purple around or inside the alpha. So you won't really see it on screen, but I can see it in person. It just brings in a little bit more of that purple. And now I very carefully remove the washi tape, and I have this line through my words that I can add my subtitle directly on top of the stamped letters that are already there. Now I do feel like a couple of the letters got a little bit lost. So I'm coming back in with a micron pen and adding a few extra lines. So I connected the top for the H, and then I wanted to bring the S downwards a little bit. I feel like you're losing some of the curve, so I'm just adding a little extra filler with my black micron pen, and then I end up deciding to outline each letter. The micron pen is darker than the VersaFine Onyx Black ink, so you do see a border, maybe not on video, but in pictures you can tell that there will be a border, and that just adds a little extra something to this particular title, and I feel like you can see the letters of This I Know a little bit clearer once I finish with that. Okay, now that I'm happy with the main letters in the title, I'm going to come back with a pencil and add the subtitle. I wanted to do hand lettering. It just didn't look right when I was filling it in, so you'll see me erase here in a second just because I didn't like how it was laying. And I'll just go with some standard printing. I always use pencils first because I'm afraid I'll make a mistake, and it's easy to erase a pencil, not so much a micron pen. So I rarely am bold enough to just write straight with pen in my Bible. I want to make sure things are placed how I like them, that the spacing works and things like that. So I am adding the subtitle. It says, God's glory sings through creation, which I think is a wonderful reminder that we can all use, is to just constantly be looking. God's glory is there. It's in our everyday. It's in our surroundings. And the more we look for it, the more we're really going to discover it and kind of deepen that relationship. So you can see I'm just tracing over with my black micron pen so that it pops out a little bit more, and then I'll go back and erase it later, erase the little pencil marks that come through, but I am making sure my micron pen is dry before I do that because there have been times I've smeared it. So it does dry pretty fast, but just don't get overzealous and start erasing right away. Okay, this is one part of the page I'm not sure I'm happy with in the end. The title was so bold in the black that I wanted to bring some black to the bottom of the page. And so I thought I will add a shadow where the rocks are because they are supposedly resting on this stone path. And so shadows would be appropriate. I have my Neocolor to black out, and I'm just using watercolor and adding a little bit of shading, but it was hard to add the shadowing with the Neocolor. It just wasn't really getting dark like I wanted to, so I probably should have come in with a black colored pencil. I'm not sure. I think I could have done the shading differently. It looks okay, and it does work in that it brings in that darkness to the bottom of the page so that the title is not so on its own, if that makes sense. So it brings a little bit of that dark, but I just wasn't totally happy with how that turned out. I think a different medium probably would have been more effective as far as the shading goes. I was trying to get it pretty dark up there in the crevices, and it just wasn't really working. Maybe I should have done a little bit more layering. That probably would have worked. Let it dry in between and then go back and add another layer, because then you can make it darker and darker and darker. The last step for this page is going to be to add a tab at the top. I consider using the last stone die cut that I have, but the shape was a little off for me. I couldn't make it work. I love this little heart cutout again from the faux suede just to bring that warmth up to the top. And I will just use some of the coordinating paper that you can get to go along with this devotional that has this stone path, which is absolutely perfect. So I will punch out a tab. That's a We Are Memory Keepers tab punch. I will link all of my supplies down below. If I forget something, just be sure to comment and I will add it in, because sometimes I go back and I get too fast and don't add in all of the things that I end up using. Now I will adhere that little suede heart again with the Fabri-Tac, getting it in place. And then the very last step will be going back and making sure I've underlined my verses just so that I don't lose track of where I was focused for this day. I also go back and add the date that I journaled this page, and you won't see that in the pictures. I realized once I took the pictures that I had left it out, but I always like to include the date because I think it's important to remember where and when you were in your faith journey when you journaled a particular page. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider hitting that subscribe button as well as the bell notification button. Like I said earlier, I have linked all the supplies down below. Some of those are affiliate links, heads up. It helps me out a lot but doesn't cost you any more. So I really appreciate if you're able to shop those. I hope that you have a fabulous day, and as always, keep it creative.